Hello everybody, I'm Lynn Scanella and this is my podcast, People Matter. And by the very clever and witty title, you can tell it's all about meerkats. No, well, that would be ridiculous. We're going to talk about people and I'm fascinated by us. I think we are a pretty fascinating bunch, and my intention is that this podcast will be about people for people and the way we act and react in times of love and war, and at the moment in times of coronavirus. So at the time of recording, most of us have been in lockdown for a couple of months at least. And even though we're all heading out and government sort of wants us on track within the next couple of months and the economy booming again, we're all just still a little bit reluctant. And these times have been challenging for many of us, physically, financially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, in all sorts of ways. So I thought it would be really useful to talk to someone who has been through a lot of his own challenges, has found a way through, and now teaches it to other people. The aptly named Peter Bliss is a life change facilitator. And for all you skeptics out there, you need to know this isn't a city guy wearing Indian garb and sort of umming. Peter came from a corporate background with senior sales and marketing roles in blue chip companies. Then he was a general manager and a managing director for an organisation for 6 years. Now, he was doing the usual sort of work hard, play hard, family mortgage, blah, blah, until a couple of near-death experiences forced him to evaluate. Today, he is an international conference speaker, a skilled mindfulness, meditation and Qigong teacher, and accredited DiMartini facilitator. Now, Peter uses a range of techniques based on ancient philosophies combined with the latest in neuroplasticity and epigenetic science-based research, and combined with his own experience to help people find true meaning, purpose and fulfillment in their lives by connecting and being their authentic self. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, Peter Bliss.
Thank you for having me, Lynn. I'm very grateful to be here.
It's lovely to have you, Peter, and I'm looking forward to it because I think it's particularly relevant in the times that we've got at the moment. Okay, so let me kick off. Now, one expects a mindfulness expert guru, to have smooth brown skin, long hair, be quite beautiful, no offence, and speak in, calm, hushed tones like this. You're more like an Aussie bloke that I'd see down at Bunnings munching on a sausage on a Saturday. So I'm really interested. Tell me about your transition from your corporate exec into mindfulness expert.
I'm actually a country boy. That's probably
that's what I'm seeing.
See, I was a country boy before I moved to the big smoke. Actually, I left home to come to Sydney to go to university. So I've been here ever since. But look, my background is basically maths and science at uni and a bit of psychology. So that's where I was heading. But then I went into the corporate world. And look, I struggled there, to be honest, for a lot of it. And I didn't really know what it was at the time. I look back now and I can see clearly what was going on. But I really struggled being a Bliss. And if you know my family, my dad, my mum, my sisters, my brothers, we had a habit of just keeping everything in and not, and me being a male in particular, just an Aussie bloke, I didn't really understand feelings or emotions. And I certainly, learnt from my own family to keep everything in. And that wasn't doing me very well in the corporate world because I was, going up pretty rapidly but struggling internally with stress and with anxiety and just all the normal pressures. And then I started having a young family and, very soon I had 4 kids under 7 and a mortgage, and I was then running a company. But look, I look back and my first, near-death experience was 89. And I look back now and that was really just feedback that I wasn't being the authentic Peter Bliss, in my view. But at the time I was in hospital for a couple of days thinking I was having a heart attack. And then I ignored those signs though then and just kept going back to work and working too hard and, as you said, playing too hard and not really understanding the full me. And then the second one that woke me up, 1999. It really scared the crap out of me more than the first one and woke me up. Well, again, it was just symptoms of a heart attack again, and but I honestly thought I had died. I actually passed out thinking I was having a heart attack, and I was by myself in a cabin, and I remember sort of just before I passed out, thinking, okay, well, this is it. And I couldn't breathe. I was sort of, I look back now, I was hyperventilating. That's what I know I was doing. But at the time I was in it, I was thinking I was having a heart attack, and I passed out thinking I died.
Wow.
That was the end of it.
Right.
But look, I didn't die, obviously, and I'll never forget my father's voice. I heard my father's voice saying, "Peter, you're not going to die. You just got to start breathing again." And he had died of a heart attack. He was already dead. Mm. And I look back now and I realised that I probably hadn't grieved my father's death at that point. And so, but look, I think he saved me by reminding me to breathe. And then I sort of came to. Spent another couple of days in John Flynn Hospital up on the Gold Coast. And that was the one that really changed what I do for myself. And I started then practicing some of the things that I teach now. And again, not to teach others. This was just before I started running a company. So
right. So this, we take you up to 1999, where you had your second event, and then you decided to look at your life and take up some new practices. But you weren't teaching it then. So what were some of the practices that you were?
I became a closet meditator.
Because in 1999.
Well, I was sort of doing it. Yeah, I was doing it before then. I was doing it since the 80s. I guess, some yoga and some meditation, dabbling in Tai Chi and Qigong and rebirthing, all sorts of weird stuff. But in 99, I then started doing it really seriously. I started doing it daily, but it still wasn't cool for an Aussie black to be doing it, especially the MD of a company. So I was doing it very early in the morning before I went to work. But I knew straight away, as soon as I developed the regular practice, that it was doing me well, even though back then there wasn't a lot of science behind it. But I just knew intuitively that I was going to work feeling like I was bulletproof, feeling like I could handle anything. Just throw a challenge at me, I can run a company, I can do anything. That's how I was going to work, because I was getting up early to do my, as my little kids call it, my weird shit. They used to call
weird shit.
I used to shut the study door and do it in there before they got up. Often they interrupted me, but look, they just came to accept it. This is what Daddy does.
It's really interesting. A couple of things jump out at me there. And one of them that I constantly think about is you say, we were taught not to talk about our feelings. And I think that millennials are much better equipped to think about and talk about their own feelings and or mental health than perhaps particularly men of our generation were. Yeah, millennials are much better equipped to sort of handle it. And we both have millennial children. What do you think, Peter?
I totally agree with you. I've got 3 sons and 2 daughters, and my 3 sons in particular, I had a son from London who's in lockdown in London, been there since January, messaging me, telling me he's scared, telling me he didn't sign up for this, telling me, what do I do, Dad? I never did that. I never talked to my dad about any of that sort of stuff. We talked about footy. That was about the only thing we had in common.
It was safe.
It was safe. And I've got another son who's just going through a breakup at the moment with the relationship, and he's been, ringing me a lot, texting me a lot, coming over a lot more, especially now that he's allowed to. And we've actually become closer, I think, in the last month because of his challenges with his relationship and because he's willing to talk about it. So yes, I totally agree.
I am so grateful, and I treasure the relationship I have with my 2 adult sons, because they will talk to me as well. And obviously in times of crisis, they're probably going to talk more. I know neither of them live near me, so I know that when one doesn't have a girlfriend, he's on FaceTime every day. Right? It's like, have you nothing else to talk to? But I love that, and I love that they will share feelings and admit fear and everything else. I just think we've really come a long way sometimes that perhaps we don't realise. So I know your grandfather was a prisoner of war in a camp in World War One. Did you ever meet him?
Yes. Yeah, no, lovely man. Very quiet.
Of course.
Horace Balcombe.
Horace Balcombe, what a beautiful name.
Yeah.
What a beautiful British name.
Rode horses. He was a farmer and he rode horses. I remember him riding his horse, and he was a lovely man, but very quiet.
And therein lies my case, that think of the experiences that he must have gone through. and yet that generation was brought in to go, we never talk about them. We don't share our feelings. Excuse me. Just keep it inside. Must have been so damaging for them. Now, it's been suggested that, epigenetic marks of trauma can be left on generations.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and passed from one generation to the next.
Yes.
I know you touch on this, and I know it's sort of it's a science that's a little raw, and some people are quite scathing about it. Do you think trauma can be intergenerational?
Definitely there's an influence there, but yes. But look, in the last sort of 7 or 8 years, I've seen enough to know that we have a huge influence on our epigenetics, on our genome expression, and we can rewire our brain. That's the latest in neuroplasticity, which is so that, the original scientific thinking was that your brain's as it is, and you can't do much about that, and same with your genes. You can't change your genes. But we're influencing our genome expression daily, and we're rewiring our brain daily based on what we're paying attention to and what we're thinking about. That's sort of undisputed now, and that's the new science. If you want to read some good books on that, The Biology of Belief probably is the best one by Dr. Bruce Lipton. That's on epigenetics, or The Brain That Changes Itself. Norman Doidge. Or his new one, I think it's called The Brain's Way of Healing. So look, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that there's still an influence, but we can change our perception. I believe all we can really change are 4 things, and it's really a choice that we've all got. So we can change our perceptions of anything that's happened to us from birth to now. Any trauma, we can change our perception of that, and I've seen it done. I've got clients who I've done it with. We can change our decisions, we can change our actions, and we can change our breathing. That's about it. Everything else is out of our control.
But those 4 things are incredibly important to dealing with any trauma or difficulty that we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even the word trauma is a sort of has a negative connotation, and a lot of people would say that this event that's happening in the world right now is a traumatic event. Well, it's all perception. It depends on your perception of what's going on, and that's what every event is really up to your perception to decide, and your perceptions are what's rewiring your brain and creating your chemicals in your brain. So
so you could say, Peter, that in this situation, so we've had coronavirus, we're all in lockdown, people have either lost their jobs or being stood down. In my speak, I know you're familiar with my fruit. I might have limes might tend to stress and worry a lot more about this, and mangoes are like, yeah, something different, yay, what else can I do, woohoo, But so I understand changing your perception around those things, but what about when something really big happens? You lose a loved one, for example.
Yep.
So let me ask you, in 2012, your sister Diana very sadly took her own life.
Yep.
I imagine that you've spoken in the past about sort of the grief and the guilt that you felt, but I imagine there was never a time when you had to put your own learnings into practice more than that.
Yes. Well, look,
tell me about that.
I had grief, definitely. I had guilt. I had resentment even to her for killing herself.
Yeah,
which sounds a bit strange, but look, and at the time I was well in years and years into my mindfulness practice, but I hadn't learned a new tool until a year later, which changed my whole perception of even that. So a year later, I met Dr. John Demartini, I think the world's expert on human behaviour. I thought I knew everything up until I met John, and I went along. I was actually dragged along by my wife, and to see this guy speak. And I, in one weekend, changed my view on a lot of things, and then became a Demartini facilitator. And then I've since the last 7 years just been trained in his work. So I do a lot of work with John now. I'm a licensed and trained facilitator. And within a year of meeting him, I dissolved my grief over Di, because he's actually got a technique which dissolves grief. It sounds bizarre, but look, it's a questioning technique which rewires the brain, changes your perception.
Okay, so I can't, I don't expect you to give us a full demonstration, but I can't let that go past because it's so massive.
Yep.
Can you give us a quick snapshot on what that would entail? Because I can't imagine if I've been really fortunate. I've never lost someone close to me, and especially in terrible circumstances like that. I can't imagine ever bouncing back. And I'm I'm a fairly resilient person. So give me a snapshot.
And I thought I was too. In fact, I think I went into a depression after I died, and I think I was, had suicidal thoughts myself for a while there. Watching John do what he does, and I've done it myself with many other clients since then. And as I said, in John's view, there's two sides to everything. So, and emotions are imbalanced perceptions. That's his definition of an emotion. So, happy, sad, kind, cruel, up, down, elation, depression, etc., benefit, drawback, grief, relief. So, which sounds pretty cold and hard to say, but I believe it's now choice. So I've learnt all the stages of grief. I actually run workshops on grief, and it's harder to explain than just to do it with somebody. So when I'm running a workshop, I just ask if anyone's grieving, and there's usually 4 or 5 people, and I would then get you out the front, and I don't have a whiteboard like I've got here, and I would just ask you what you're missing about the person that you're grieving. What are the things you miss? And it's a process. It's a questioning process which is based on science. It's based on the fact that from the beginning of this planet's existence, nothing has been destroyed. Everything just changes form. So if a fire swept through my house right now, tragically, everything would just change form, and that's called the law of thermodynamics. It's a basic science law that we learn in high school. So John's sort of taken that science and uses that technique for grief. But look, it's hard to explain because it's unbelievable to explain. But an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours at the most later, you wouldn't be grieving. You would have nothing. Instead of emotion, grief, as I said, in John's view, is an emotion. So instead of not being able to talk about my sister's suicide and tearing up and and doing this sort of thing, I can now talk about her or even think about her with nothing but love and gratitude. So it turns grief into love and gratitude. So there's nothing we can change about my sister's death. It was a tragedy when it happened, but I can't change that. But I can look at how much I've learnt from that, and this is going to sound bizarre, I'm grateful for what her death has taught me about emotions, about mental health, about how little we know about the brain, about how little we know about mental health. And I know that I've got a very powerful tool that I can use if someone wants to change their grief, which is emotion, to love and gratitude, which is not emotion. She's in my heart if I want to think about her. Not only have I had that done on me by a facilitator, my daughter, Lara, who was actually grieving the first year I met John about the death of an ex-boyfriend who died of a brain tumour, she had John DeMartini do that in front of 200 people in a seminar live, and I thought, wow, this is now serious because this is my daughter. Yeah. And I'd only seen him do this once, and I thought, well, if this is a trick, I'm going to be really pissed. And but an hour, and my 3 sons were sitting next to me as well, and they're going, oh, Dad, this is as if this is going to work. They're rolling their eyes, and because she'd been picked out of 200 people to get up on stage, and she was grieving, and she couldn't even speak about this death of this friend, ex-boyfriend. Yeah. And an hour and a half on my heart, an hour and a half later, this is 7 years ago, she's not grieving. She has love and gratitude for this friend. And 7 years later, we thought, oh, it might last a couple of days or a week. Yeah. Now, 7 years later, she's still not grieving. Now, this friend's mother is still grieving. Now, that's her choice. There's no right or wrong here. There's just she's got a choice. And Lara I think was lucky to go through this experience, and she's now getting on with her life, and whenever she thinks about this friend, she just has love and gratitude and lovely memories, and it's a difference between that and grief, which is an emotion which blocks you and sort of sometimes occupies space and time in your mind, and then you can't get on with your life. And,
well, Peter, it does sound incredible, but I think it's certainly something worth exploring for people, because so many people, I know you've been working in mental health and depression now for so long, and so much of it is self-taught through your own experiences, and I know that sometimes like you might use methods like this which are not considered traditional. So I remember
mainstream, no.
I remember
although there's a lot of research being done right now in Japan at a university, because a lot of DiMartini facilitators and John have been go to Japan during every major tragedy like earthquakes and floods and Fukushima, and he's now researching this technique and writing books about it. So look, it's becoming more and more widespread. So sorry, you were going to go say something about you remember you had someone.
Well, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, Peter. Let me think. I remember what I was going to say. I remember referring a friend to you. She'd had a lot of problems with her son. She'd been to many counsellors, psychiatrists, psychologists, came to you and really found a measure of success and peace. Apart from DiMartini, are there other techniques that you use? And I'll just ask you to give me bullet points here, because I got some other stuff to talk about, and I see that already we're at about 30 minutes. So if you could just, do you have any other techniques that you use that are different to mainstream or traditional techniques that psychologists and psychiatrists might use?
Oh, look, all the traditional ones are, I teach meditation, I teach Qigong, I teach Tai Chi, I teach breathing techniques. So look, a lot of good psychologists and psychiatrists will, actually a lot of doctors refer people to me to learn those things. So,
great.
But a lot of psychologists, good ones, teach some of that now. Maybe they're doing some CBT or something, and they'll do some of that. And mindfulness has become very mainstream now.
Gratitude,
gratitude is another technique, which is, there's a lot of myths around gratitude. There's sort of a fake gratitude, which is what you see on a lot of on Facebook and Instagram, or there's true gratitude, which is the real technique, which is basically an example would be COVID-19. What are you grateful for? If you can be grateful for something that's happened in COVID-19, that's true gratitude. It's grateful for all the challenges that you've had to endure, the lockdown, the isolation. If you can find something to be grateful for, that's true gratitude. That's real gratitude. Being grateful for the challenges that you've had. That really makes a difference.
So that's not just saying then I'm going to find the positives in the negatives. It's actually being grateful for the negatives occurring.
Yeah, grateful for the challenges. Yeah. Not just grateful for the nice partner, the nice house. I've got a roof over my head. Yeah, that's all the easy stuff. No, that's what I call sort of false gratitude, and that's what a lot of people are peddling these days. True gratitude is seeing both sides. The support and challenge, you need both to grow. Everyone needs both to grow.
You certainly do. And in a simpler form, you can't have the ups without the downs. Listen, as a conference speaker and trainer, I'm really used to working from home, and I'm highly disciplined. I'm also highly wired. But I thought a few years ago, for the last few years, I thought, look, I've pretty much mastered this calmness thing, because I know I'm about 200% less energetic than I used to be. So it's good. It's good. I get out in nature a lot. I'm lucky enough to live in a place where I can. I practice yoga, say 5 days a week. I meditate, not always successfully. But for some reason at the moment, through COVID, I don't seem to be handling it as best best I could. I practice breathing and that, but I'm still a bit more, bit on. What advice have you got for people like me? Some simple steps for helping us to feel calm when I'm not feeling anxious, but I'm full of energy that isn't always healthy.
Well, I guess my first comment is don't expect to stay calm. Stay connected. I wrote an article a couple of months ago at the beginning of this crisis we're in now that was the heading: don't expect to stay calm, stay connected. You might find moments of calm, but again, true mindfulness, which I think is different to what a lot of people teach, which is that you're meant to be calm, you're meant to be happy, you're meant to be positive. I don't agree with any of that. I think a true mindfulness is experiencing the sadness, experiencing the negative, experiencing the stress, experiencing the anxiety, and being with that and being comfortable with that and learning from that and growing from that. So that's true mindfulness. It's not. You're not trying to rid it. In fact, I'm about to write another article, so it's called "Stop Trying to Get Rid of Half Yourself." A lot of people try and get rid of half themselves: their sadness, their challenges, their depression, their anxiety, their stress, etc., etc. So I'm totally against that, because that's part of who you are, and especially in times what we're experiencing now, which none of us have ever experienced before. We're going to feel a little bit anxious, and we're going to, the amygdala and the part of the brain that's sort of scanning for every day for what's for fear. It's under a lot of pressure at the moment, really, because there's lots of things happening. A lot of people have you've heard of FOGO, fear of going out.
No, I haven't.
That's the new one, right? So that's going to affect a lot of people, sort of my age and above, because we're being told to stay at home.
That's right.
It's like, wow. So there's a lot to deal with right now. So it's normal and it's okay. Not even normal. It's okay, is what I would say, to feel and be stressed and be a bit anxious, and that's normal, and that's okay. So don't expect to stay calm. Stay connected to yourself.
Yeah.
Be aware that a lot of that
we've lost
information,
you, Peter. Oh, there you go.
The sort of supposed negative information, I believe, a lot of that supposed negative information is just feedback to tell us that we've got an imbalanced perception, rather than wrong. It's not wrong. It's not wrong to be depressed, to be sad, to be anxious, to be negative.
Yeah, I thank you. I love. I think there's a really wise words. Too much of the time, we try to be something that we're not. And I know you talk a lot, and one of your passions is about being, you helping people to be their authentic self.
Yeah.
Now, if there was someone, perhaps, excuse me, someone who had never thought about this before. Like I know people that are they're going along going, what do you mean authentic self? No, I'm just me. I get up, I go to work, I do my job. What do you mean think about my authentic self? How does someone like this, they've never thought about it, how do they start to think about connecting to themselves? Well,
firstly, they've got to want it. They've got to have a want or a need for something else. They've got to be some sort of dissatisfaction or ingratitude for where they are.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. You can't change anybody unless they want to be changed. So, as I said before, we can't change anyone else. We can change our perceptions, our decisions, our actions, our breathing. So, I think we're all looking for the same thing. I think if people just got present and centered and grounded, which the easiest way to do that is through the breath.
Yeah.
Just through slowing the breath down, through deepening the breath down. If you do that regularly enough, and a lot of people, in fact, start meditation or yoga, all these uncomfortable feelings come up, and that's why they give up.
Yes.
And I would say, well, hang on, that's the good stuff.
Yes.
That's the stuff that you suppressed for so long.
Yes.
And it's wanting to come up to be acknowledged. So, the first step is just to let that come up and just sort of sit with that. And you don't have to actually change it necessarily. You just got to feel it. And, life is challenging and life is tough sometimes. And the more resilient we are, the more we know that. And we know that we can, that's okay. And I can just sit with that and I can get through that. So, look, the breath is the key. So, even sighing, which is longer out breaths, shorter in breaths. which is the body's just normal way of actually trying to give us some feedback. But scientifically, we now know that when you breathe out longer than you breathe in, you activate the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve in the body.
Yes.
It starts at the back of the head here. Vagus is Latin for wanderer. It wanders from the back of the head down the neck, through the front of the throat, it connects all the body's organs, and it activates them. So it's activating the rest and digest and relax part of the autonomic nervous system, the actual parasympathetic nervous system. So if you simply learn how to activate your vagus nerve, you're meant to have a sympathetic system, which is the stress response, and a parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, relax response, in balance. They're supposed to be both working in balance. But today, we're so wired, we're so in our stress response, in our sympathetic nervous system, we don't know how to sort of shut down that, and we've just got an overactive sympathetic nervous system. Like when we're stressed, or when we can't sleep, or when we're blaming anxiety or depression, or all these things where we're saying they're all bad, and we might have some of them, but we don't know what to do with them. It just means you're out of balance, in my view.
Okay, so if we're giving people who, let's assume that they want to find their authentic self, they move past that first moment of skepticism, one thing that they could try is the first thing that they could do is learning how to try some basic breathing. So they can do that. You can even do that through an app, and we'll put some show notes down to where you can find, information like this and all of Peter's stuff. Peter, we are going to have to wind it up. I know that you run, in normal times, you run these very special retreats. You've been to Japan, Bhutan, Uluru, anywhere else?
India. I do 4 a year usually.
Okay, wonderful stuff. So where can people find you? What's happening in your world in the next 12 months? How can they get in touch?
Look, I'm still running. I've learned a lot of stuff online, so I'm doing online stuff now. So everything I offer normally face-to-face, I'm doing on Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, etc. So just go to my website, businessisbliss.com.au, Business is Bliss, or find me on LinkedIn, Peter Bliss, find me on Facebook. But look, I'm doing everything as normal online. I'm doing lots of webinars online.
All right, that's great. So we can find you at businessisbliss.com.au pretty much for all of those things for your workshops and your webinars and your retreats into the future.
Retreats, they're all there.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, Pete. It's been lovely to chat, for reminding us that we can only change 4 things: decisions, perceptions, actions, and breathing. Yeah?
Yeah, the breath. That's it.
And the breath. 4 things, and to be our authentic self, to know that depression and the crap out there that happens to us is a completely normal part of life, and there are always ways through. Of course, if you are struggling with any of these things, don't hesitate to call people like Beyond Blue or Lifeline. Once again, we'll put those in our show notes. Thank you so much, Peter Bliss. That's us for today. And although restrictions are now lifting in many states, the government plans to get us all back to normal. So many of us are still working remotely, and we're trying our best to stay connected, and sometimes that's a challenge. So I've got a couple of options for you to consider around my program, Working with People You Just Don't Get. Now, it's pretty much what it says. You go online, you do a profile, you find out if your preference is for apple, mango, lime and banana, and then away you go. You've got a choice. You've got a nice, fast and furious 30-minute webinar that you can do with me, or you could do a 30-minute video followed up by a 30-minute video which you can watch in your own time, followed up by a Zoom Q&A with me for 30 minutes where we can really nut out some problems. Or you might want to book me for a face-to-face workshop post-COVID, or for next year for a conference, or maybe just buy the book, Bite Me, Other Do's and Don'ts of Dealing with Our Differences. So all of this and more you can find on my website at lynscanella.com.au. Thank you everyone for listening today. As this is brand new, I'd love you to subscribe, review if you're feeling particularly generous, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn, so connect with me there so we can all try and stay as connected as possible in this weird but beautiful world that we live in. Respect, connect and thrive. I'm Lynn Scanella and this has been People Matter.